Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave with Evil Eye Games. In the last video we went up and we set up our static meshes and got ready for exporting them to Unreal Engine. In this video we're actually going to go ahead and perform the export, import them into Unreal Engine, configure them, and set up some materials for our new meshes. Now, one thing I wasn't very happy with the last time we left off was the UV maps for our bulkhead here. So I'm going to show you what I ended up doing and how I did it. So I'm going to drag out a second window here, and we're going to go to our UV image editor, and we'll go into edit mode on our left hand window, and this is what I ended up creating for the light map. And I like this a lot better because it gives a lot more area to the larger areas out here. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and with everything selected on our bulkhead, we're going to go to Unwrap, and we're going to select a Smart UV project with the island margin set to 0.05 and hit OK. And this is what we're going to get. So in our UV image editor window here, I'm going to go ahead and hit A to deselect all. I'm going to hit B for our box select, and I'm going to select these top portions here. And then to move these, I'm going to use the G key to grab it, and I'm going to move these off of our island here for a little bit. I'm going to hit A to deselect again, B for box select, and I'm going to go ahead and box select these groupings over here, hit G to grab, and then left click to place it outside of our island again. So I'm going to hit A to deselect everything. I'm going to use our box select to select our main portions here. I'm going to hit G to grab our bulkheads and kind of drop them in the center here as close as we can get, and left click to place them down. Then I'm going to hit S to scale, and I want to scale these guys up so that they can fit as much of this area as possible. And then we can use G to grab and kind of place them on our UV map here. And if we want, we can hit S to scale and Y in the Y-axis and kind of stretch them out a little bit more. And then G to grab them and place them pretty close to center. And that's looking good. So I'm going to go ahead and A to deselect all. And I'm going to deal with this group of islands first. So I'm going to hit B to box select. Select all of these guys, hit G to grab, and I'm going to drag them over, and I'm going to go ahead and place them inside of this doorway. And then we're going to do the same thing with this grouping over here. So I'm going to hit A to deselect, B to box select, select these guys, G to grab them, and then I'm going to place them in the center of our left-hand open area. And the reason I'm doing it this way is these large bulkheads over here are going to be the majority of what the player is going to see. So having more area for the UV map is going to just improve the shadow quality on these bulkheads. Essentially with the light maps, you want to go ahead and fill up as much space as possible. And you want to kind of try and balance out everything to make sure that it's scaled appropriately. You can put a background image in the back of this and have it project onto the mesh itself so you can see the scaling. But since I'm using flat colors, it's not really going to matter all that much. So I'm just going to go with this for now, and we'll see how it pans out in the game engine. So at this point I can go to File and Save. And I'm going to get rid of this window here. And I'm going to go back to object mode. So now we can go ahead and export everything out. So I'm going to grab the floor first. I'm going to have that selected. I'm going to go to File, Export, FBX. And I want a new folder in here for this hallway so I can put all of our hallway materials into that folder. So at the top with the location and the file path, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in the name of a new directory and hit enter, and it's going to ask me if we want to create a new directory. I'm going to click on create new directory. And we're going to come down here to our export settings. And one thing you may notice is every time you reopen Blender, it is not going to save these export settings. So you're going to have to check this each and every time. So I'm going to go ahead and check our selected objects here. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on Mesh. And then we're going to go to Geometries, and we're going to set the smoothing to Face. And since we just have the floor selected, I'm going to go up here to where we name the file, and I'm just going to add in a underscore floor so that we know specifically what it is. And we're going to go ahead and hit Export. Next, I'm going to go ahead and grab the wall. We'll do the same thing, File, Export, FBX. And at this point, since we already exported while Blender was open, it's going to keep our settings down here, but it's always good to check these things, just in case. And for this one, we're doing the wall. So for the name up here, I'm going to change it from floor to wall. And we'll go ahead and hit Export. And then we'll grab the ceiling. And I noticed that I didn't go ahead and name this object in our scene outliner. So real fast, I'm going to grab this and we'll call it the ceiling. And we'll go to File, Export, FBX. And we'll go ahead and change the name here to ceiling. And we'll go ahead and hit Export. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our bulkhead. And we'll go to File, Export. And I'm going to call this the doorway. And we'll hit Export. And then finally we'll have to grab the door. So we'll go to File, Export, FBX. I'll just call it the door. So that's all of our different pieces. They've now been exported into an FBX file that we can go ahead and import into Unreal Engine. So quickly, I'll just go up to File and I'll hit Save. So we're going to move over to Unreal Engine now. And right now I have our import test map open. Now we're going to want to create a directory to put our meshes in here. So inside of our maps folder, I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call this the meshes. We're going to double click on our meshes folder to go into it. And we're going to go ahead and import our meshes. So we're going to have to go ahead and locate where all of our FBX files are located. I'm going to go ahead and hold Shift and select all of them. And we're going to go ahead and click Open. Now with these settings here, we're going to want to make sure skeletal is unchecked. I'm going to leave Auto Generate Collision off. And we're going to want to make sure that the Generate Light Map UVs is unchecked because we built our own light maps. And then because we're going to be creating our own materials, I'm going to leave Import Materials and Import Textures unchecked. So I'm going to go ahead and click Import All. And we'll now have our static meshes in here. So I'm going to hit Save All to save these static meshes. And let's go ahead and we'll open up each one and take a look. So we'll open up our ceiling. And we can go ahead and maneuver around to check out our ceiling. And it has our default materials on it for right now, which is fine. And if we take a look at our UVs, we'll have our UV in here for our channel 0 and our channel 1. Channel 1 being the light map. And let's take a look and see what it has for collision. If we go up to collision, there's no option to remove collision, so there's literally nothing on here for collision. And we can have an auto-generate collision for our mesh if we want. So let's see how that's going to go. So down here, I'm going to use the convex decomposition, and I'm going to leave it at the default settings of an accuracy of 0.5 and max hole verts at 16, and we're going to go ahead and hit Apply. And it's going to take a little bit where it's going to process the static mesh and decide how to apply collision to it. And once it gets done, we're going to see exactly how it decided to apply collision. Now it has two flat planes up here, it looks like. It actually truncates it off. Here we go. So our purple lines here are the collision. And you'll notice that it sometimes creates these crazy lines in here that don't make a whole lot of sense. So that's not going to work out all that great. Especially the lines that come and travel across here. I think that might be the top of our mesh. But to be honest, this collision isn't all that great. One thing we can do is we can actually use the static mesh as the collision. Now, I'm going to warn you ahead of time that the more complex collision gets, the more resources it's going to take up. So with our meshes, they're pretty simple and straightforward. So on the right hand side here, I'm going to go down to static mesh settings and collision complexity. I'm going to set this to use complex collision as simple. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to copy our static mesh and use that as the actual collision. You just want to be careful with this because this can cause issues if you create higher poly models. That will make them really complex on the collision, and it will cause issues further down the line. But for these simple low poly models, we can use that complex collision as simple, and we're not going to have that much of an issue. And so for our settings on the right here, I'm going to go ahead and use double-sided geometry on this, just so it has collision on both sides of the plane. And other than that, we don't really have anything we need to set up right now, but we don't have any materials to apply to our mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and create some now. So I'm going to go back up to our maps folder. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this folder materials. And we're going to open up our materials folder. I'm going to right click in there and create a new material. And this new material I'm going to call our flat base underscore mat. And this is going to be the base material that we're going to create instances of to color our different objects. So we'll go ahead and open up our flat base material. And we have these outputs for the material over here. So the first one we're going to want to take care of is the base color. So we want this constant 3 vector, or you can see the hotkey to the right is a 3. So if I hold the 3 button down and left click, it's going to give me this constant 3 vector. I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug this into our base color. And we want to be able to change this. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and convert to a parameter. And then to the left over here for the parameter name, I'm just going to call this color. And we can set the default color to something different, just so it'll be easier to look at. And let's try that again. I think here we go. So we'll just change it out like that. So set the color for the parameter, and we'll set the parameter name to color. So that way when we create an instance of this, we can set the color. Next we have our metallic, specular, roughness. And for these values, we're simply going to take a constant. So that's the number 1 over here. So I'll hold down the 1 key and left click. And I'm going to put 3 of these in. And we're going to make these parameters as well. So for the first one, for the parameter name, I'm just going to call this metallic. And then for the slider max value, I'm going to set this to 1. And we're going to go ahead and plug this into the metallic. The second parameter, we will go ahead and right click on it and convert to parameter. We'll set the slider max to 1 again. And for the parameter name, we'll call this specular. Then we'll go ahead and take this and plug this into our specular. And for the third constant here, we'll go ahead and right click, convert to parameter. set the slider max to 1, and we'll call the parameter name roughness. And then we'll go ahead and plug this into our roughness. Now, if we want to have an emissive color, like for the lighting, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to drag out from our color pin here, and I'm going to search for a multiply. And we're going to plug the result of this multiply into the emissive color. And we're going to need a constant to control our emissive. So I'm going to go ahead and add another constant. We're going to convert this to a parameter. And I'm going to call this parameter name emissive. And I'm going to set the slider max on here to 10. And we're going to plug this into our multiply. And as we adjust this, we'll be able to control how emissive the material is. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is going to be specific to flat colored objects. So if you end up generating normals for your meshes, you're not going to want to use this material. You're going to want to create another material for that. But for the case of this, since everything is going to be colored a single color, we can use this. So I'm going to right click in the graph and I'm going to search for world position. And in this list here to the top, there's the, let's see, where is it? Oh, here it is, world position with scale. We're going to grab this guy and we're going to drag out from the XYZ and we're going to search for DDX. And then we're going to drag out from our XYZ again and we're going to search for DDY. Now, one thing to note about these functions is these are specific calls to the graphics card, and essentially they're derivatives. But one thing to note is if you're planning on using a mobile platform, this will not work on them. So if you're going to be making a mobile game, you can't use these derivatives in order to create a flat shaded surface. You're going to have to find some other way to get around that. So from our DDX, I'm going to drag out, and we're going to search for cross. And we'll select the cross product. And we'll cross our DDX and our DDY. And we're going to go ahead and plug this into our normal. And then one last thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to select our material. And we're going to scroll down in the list of options over here. And there's so many options, I'm having an issue finding it. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and there's this tangent space normal. We're going to go ahead and uncheck that. And that's going to go ahead and complete our material. Now, if you're using normals on your material, you're going to want to take note, you're going to want to have this tangent space normal checked. Most tangents, in fact, pretty much every tangent I've ever seen, or every normal I've seen, uses tangent space. So that's just something to be aware of. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and we can close out of our material. And we're going to go back to our main window, and we'll right click on this, and we'll create a material instance. And let's say for the first one, we're going to create a white material. So I'm just going to name it white INST. So it's our white instance. So if we double click on the material instance, we're going to have this where we have the option to set our parameters over here. So if we check on the color, we can go ahead and select a new color if we want. And I'm just going to set this to, let's say 0.9 for all the RGB values. And we'll hit OK. And then for our different parameter values here, we can definitely go ahead and play around with them and see what they do. Now, I put them in alphabetical order, which reordered them a little bit, but that's no big deal. The first one that is in the list here of our materials is the emissive. So if we check our emissive here and we go ahead and scale it up, we can see that it creates a glowing effect on our material. So it'll make our material look like it is glowing. The one thing to really keep in mind, though, is that it won't actually emit any light. it'll just look like it's emitting light. So this is not something that you can use to actually light a level, but it can create the effect of lamp glowing, and then you can add a light to it to actually make it emit light. The next one down our list here is the metallic, and if we play with the metallic and we scale it up, it gives our material a more metallic appearance. So if we're using white and we turn the metallic all the way up, it's going to look like this kind of chrome material or a mirror-like material. One thing to keep in mind too is that if the metallic is enabled, it's going to ignore specular. So if we go to our specular real fast and we go ahead and crank this up, the specular is the way it reflects things without a metallic appearance. So you can relate this to having like a really shiny gloss finish on something to the point where it will start reflecting light. And lastly, we have the roughness. And the roughness will obviously make the object look more rough than it is, which in this case, if it's a flat object, turning up the roughness really doesn't do anything. So let's go ahead, we'll enable our metallic here. And if we click on our roughness, all of a sudden it's very non-reflective. But if we start turning our roughness down, it reflects more and more light. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck these. So for my base materials, I'm not really going to use the emissive metallic, the roughness, or the specular at all. I'm just going to leave it at this default 0 values, and we can just set the color. Obviously, you can play around with it and come up with some settings that you like. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and close. And then we're going to go ahead and right-click, and we can create another material instance. And I'm going to call this our red instance. And we can obviously assign a color to this. So I'll give it a value of 0.2 for the red and 0 for the green and the blue. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. And that's all I'm going to do for this one. And I also want to go ahead and create a material for the bulkheads that's different so they stand out. So we're going to go ahead and create another material instance. And I'm going to call this the gray instance. And we'll select our color. So we'll set it to something like, let's see what 0.2 looks like. Okay, I'm liking that. So I'm going to hit OK. And we're going to go ahead and save that. And then we're also going to need a material for the floor. So I'm going to right-click, create a material instance, and then I'm going to call this gloss black instance. And we'll go ahead and open this up, and I'll select the color. And one thing I've noticed for these objects is setting it to pure black is not only really hard to tell what you're looking at in here, but it doesn't really look that great in the game. So we're going to up these values here. Let's try 0.1. That's a little too gray. So we'll try 0.05 on our values. And we're going to go with that. And we're going to set the specular on this. So I'm going to start cranking up the specular a little bit so I start to get a reflective edge on it. I think I might want to make it even a little darker than this. So let's try 0.02 and hit OK. And I'm going to stick with that. So we'll set the specular down a little bit. We'll set it 0.2. All right, so I'm gonna deal with that. So we'll go ahead and close it. We'll see how it looks in the game. But here in our hallway ceiling again, we can go ahead and start to apply materials to it. So to the right here, under our LOD, there's going to be these 3 materials that we added. And if we want to check out and see what material we're affecting, there's the highlight button here. So if we click on here, it'll shade everything orange for where that material is placed. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and make it our white instance. and we can unhighlight it. Then for element 2, that is the center running piece. So I'm going to go ahead and make that our red instance. And then we didn't create a light instance yet because I forgot. So we're going to go ahead and create a new material instance. And I'm going to call this the light instance. And in this instance, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to leave this kind of beigey color in here. And we'll go to emissive, and we'll try 5 and see how that looks. So it kind of creates this classic light bulb color in here. And we can definitely play around with these later. But for now, I'm going to just go with that beigey color. And then in our hallway ceiling, we can go ahead and find our light instance and apply it onto the material. So now it looks like the light panel up here is glowing. So we can go ahead and hit save and close out of our ceiling. So back in our meshes, next we have to take care of the door. And right now, if we check on our collision, there's not going to be any collision in here. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and generate a collision. So let's go to collision, and we can try different collisions if we want. Let's try this add 18 DOP simplified collision. And that actually looks pretty good. So I'm not really going to play with that at all. I'm just going to go ahead and use that collision. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And then we can apply the material to this. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to my... Where is it? Here we go. The white instance. And we can go ahead and hit save. And we can close out of our door. And then we're going to have the doorway. And we want to set up the collision for this as well. And for this one, I've tried all kinds of different things to get the collision for this thing to work. And it really is kind of a pain in the ass. And seeing as how if we look at the wireframe, our skeleton on this is not really all that complex, or the mesh is not all that complex. I'm just going to go ahead and set our collision complexity to use complex as simple. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply the material to it for our gray material. And we're going to go ahead and save this and close. And then we're going to have to deal with the floor. For this one, I'm going to use the complex collision as simple because it's just a simple plane. And we can set our material to be the floor material that we created. So we can save that and close. And finally, we have the wall. And the wall material as well, I'm going to go ahead and use the use complex collision as simple. And then we can take a look at the elements in here and apply the materials. So for the main wall material, I'm going to use that white material instance. And then for the running boards, I'm going to use that red material instance. So we're going to go ahead and hit save and close. Now right now in our level, we have all of these blockout templates that I was using before. So I'm going to go ahead and just basically get rid of all these blockout templates. So at this point, we can go ahead and start dragging things in. So I'm going to grab the floor, and I'm going to go ahead and drop that guy in. And I'm going to set this to all zeros for the transform location. And we'll go ahead and we'll drag in a wall. And we want to make sure that it is at the 0 transform as well. And we're going to go ahead and duplicate it and rotate one around so that it has the other side. We can go ahead and drop in our ceiling. And once again, we can just set this to all zeros in the transform. And then we'll plop it directly into the right place. And then we can drag in this doorway. And we can slide it over to the one end. And one thing you'll notice is that I am using the 50 grid size for the snap locations to make it really easy to place it into place. And we'll go ahead and drag another one over here. And in order to replicate the effect that I want, there's this environmental lighting, or the light source up here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of our light source. And we'll get rid of the sky sphere too. I don't really need that. And we'll get rid of our atmospheric fog. We'll go ahead and get rid of that as well. And this is going to leave our level pretty unlit. We'll take care of that in a second. And then we're just going to drag out some of these doors. And we're going to go ahead and snap them into position on each side. And so I will just go ahead and create a single hallway unit so we can check it out. And we're going to have to add a light in here. So onto the left here, I'm going to grab a point light and we're going to drag this in. And I'm just going to kind of center this below our light. And I'm going to leave it down a little bit so it goes ahead and fills in the lighting for up here. Because you notice if you drag it up too far, it'll start creating shadows along the top here. So I'm going to just drag it down a little bit to make it look a little bit better. And then for the intensity over here, I'm going to drop this down because we have a small area to something like 1000. And let's go ahead. And at this point, we're going to go and build our lighting. So I'm going to click on the build button. And once our lighting build has been completed, we can close this. And if we hit play, we can see that everything looks pretty good. So the shading and everything is done pretty well, except on this bulkhead right here. It seems like there's some dark edges around here. So we can definitely take a look into that. So let's go ahead and escape out of the editor. And we're going to use the light map density to kind of decide on our light maps. So if we go up to here where it says lit, we're going to go to optimizations and we're going to select light map density. And this is going to go ahead and show us the overall, basically how many pixels are located on the light map for each one of these objects. And really what we're going for is we kind of want this greenish, like a teal color for the ideal light map resolution. So right now most of this other stuff is in blue, and you can see it paints a grid on there to see the scale of the pixels on the light map. So we're going to have to go ahead and make some adjustments to our light map resolution in order to improve the shadow quality. So we're going to have to open up each piece. We'll start with a floor here. So I'm going to open up our floor mesh, and we're going to come over to the right here, and we're going to see a light map resolution. And if we actually search up here for a light map, we'll have the minimum light map resolution and the light map resolution. The important thing to note about these is these numbers have to be in powers of 2. So you can't enter random numbers like 33 or 100. So I'm going to take this minimum light map resolution here, and I'm going to bump this up. I'm going to double it to 128. And I'm going to set our light map resolution here to 128 as well. And we're going to go ahead and hit save. And if we go back to our map, you'll notice now the floor is this tan color because we have to rebuild the lighting in order to see how the light map resolution is working out for us. But we'll go ahead and we'll take care of the other meshes too. So we have the doorway. I'm going to open this guy up. And if we search for our light map, I'm going to go ahead and double the light map resolution for this and the minimum light map resolution. And we'll go ahead and hit save. And you'll see that the door frame is now this tan color. We'll take care of our wall. So we'll search for light map, and we'll set the light map resolutions to 128 and 128, and save. And then we're going to have to do the ceiling as well. So we're going to open up our ceiling, and we're going to search for our light map. And we'll set this to 128 also. And we'll hit save. Now at this point, we're going to have to go ahead and rebuild the lighting, so I'll click the build button. Alright, so our light map build has been completed, and we have this teal color that we want on the floor here, but the rest of this is in green, and really it's kind of a balancing game at this point. You can go in and you can edit the light map UVs in Blender to kind of make it better. But as long as it's between this blue and the green color here, I think I can live with that. If it ends up turning red, that's going to mean your light maps are too dense. So as long as you play around with your light map colors a little bit, you can get into the general area of having a blue or bluish green color. And that will make the lighting quality pretty good for your level. So if we switch back over to lit mode here, if we take a look at our doorway here, a lot of the issues with the shading have been resolved. So a lot of it looks much better. And then of course we can test out and make sure our collision is actually working. So if we go ahead and fire our weapon around, it is going to collide with all the elements in the level. And of course we can't run through the walls. So it looks like everything is operating pretty good. Now you can definitely play around with the material instances, and you can definitely add more complexity to the meshes as you want. The one thing to really take notice of too is if you're grabbing a wall here, you'll notice that the manipulator exists in the center of the floor right here. And the reason being is in Blender, when you end up creating an object in this space, the manipulator of origin is going to be at the center of the 0, 0, 0, where the manipulator is here in this particular instance. So that is something to take into consideration when making meshes as well. In this particular case, the walls will always line up with the floor as long as they're all in the same position. So right now, the floor, the walls, and the ceiling are all technically located at the 0, 0, 0 position, which their origin exists right here, which is going to make it really easy to manipulate different things within the level. So that way, if I drop a floor in and I want the wall to be at the same position, I can drop the wall in, add the same position, and boom, it's going to automatically line up with each other. Now, if you're trying to create more modular pieces where you can fit them together, you're probably going to want to, in Blender, all locate them somewhere around this 0, 0, 0 point, either as a starting location for a corner or centering the object in that 0, 0, 0 origin. And then if we want to go ahead and expand our hallway here, it's going to be pretty easy. We can just select the ceiling and the hallways here, and we can go ahead and basically duplicate them and drag them along like this. And we can go ahead and duplicate the door frame here. And if you're having problems seeing things in here, it's not that big of an issue. If we click on lit, we can set it to unlit. And for most cases, it's probably best to do your level designing in unlit mode. And I'm going to also duplicate some of these lights over here. So go ahead and duplicate a couple of lights. And I want to show you guys why I created these bulkheads too. So let's go ahead and take out these center bulkheads. And we're going to go ahead and build our lighting. And the bulkheads are not there just to create some additional interesting something in the level. But once we have our level lighting built here, if we go back to lit, and we take a look at the positions where these panels meet for the wall here, you'll notice that there is kind of this seam that exists here. Now, if you're using a material that uses normals, that will essentially kind of hide these seams. But since these are flat materials, the shading doesn't translate from this panel over to this panel. It's calculated independently of each mesh. So there's not going to be like a smooth transition over here. And that's why I also mentioned earlier that if you're going to be creating a large piece, you're going to want to create one single large piece. Aside from the benefits of just having one mesh instead of having, a dozen or so meshes, is that it will even out the lighting across the entire surface. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate these bulkheads back in. Like so, and we can build our lighting again. And once that's complete, we go ahead and hit play and take a walk around. Everything in here is looking pretty sharp. So all the shadowing and everything looks pretty good. The shadow resolution of our character up against the wall here looks pretty good as well. I mean, you can sharpen it up by adding more light map density to the wall or the different surfaces here. But one thing to definitely keep in mind is the fact that if you increase those resolutions are going to go ahead and increase your build time. So you'll have more detailed shadows on them, but it's going to go ahead and definitely extend the amount of time it takes to build those light maps for each piece. So if you have a lot of pieces in a map and the light map resolution for all of them is at 4K, you could literally, depending obviously on your PC specs, end up running just the light map build for days on end. So that is something to keep in mind and balance. You generally want to keep the light maps as small as possible without sacrificing the quality. If I ended up bumping up the light map resolutions at this point to something significantly higher, I really wouldn't be gaining all that much from increasing the light maps, but I would be increasing my build time exponentially. So that's going to complete today's video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below or stop by my Facebook page. You can comment or message me over there. And thanks for watching.